How healthy is your marriage? What grade would you give your relationship? I'm Dr. Carol, and this is Relationship Prescriptions. There's little or nothing that impacts your sense of well-being more than the quality of your closest personal relationships. And if you're married, that's the situation with your spouse. For the next about 6 weeks, we are focusing specifically here on marriage at Relationship Prescriptions, and I have some really wonderful things to share with you. But maybe your marriage isn't quite so wonderful. The sad news is that even in the Christian church, there are far too many marriages that are anything but healthy. Just for a real quick minute, I want to start with a couple statistics, and then we're going to talk about your marriage. You may have heard the often quoted statistic that 50% of even Christian marriages end in divorce. There's not that much difference between the divorce rate among Christian marriages and those who don't have a Christian faith. That number can be debated, and there's different ways of looking at that statistic, and it may or may not be 100% accurate all the time. But the point is, this is still far too frequent an occurrence in Christian couples, and it shouldn't be that way. One large survey showed that only 23% of Christian couples were very satisfied with their relationship. Again, it shouldn't be that way. The Journal of Psychology did a large survey showing that 65% of men and 55% of women had been unfaithful in their relationship prior to the age of 40. One of the deepest ways of betrayal is sexually betraying your spouse, and over half, again, it just very, very sad. What about your relationship? Whether it's one of those really big factors, you may just be living in misery. Maybe you are living in the same house but feel like you're miles apart. There's silence or anger or fighting or frustration, absolutely no intimacy. Maybe you're not sure how much longer you can survive living in the marriage that you're in. Well, for your marriage, this isn't the end. It's just a setup for a miracle. That's the really, really good news. I want to introduce to you the Marriage Healing Kit from Dr. Carol Ministries. This is a whole group of resources to help you deal with the hard places in your marriage. This is biblically based. We bring in a lot of scientific support, and it is practical to help you get beyond the fighting and the anger and the silence. If you want your relationship to no longer feel like a battleground or just a state of emptiness or misery, you can get there. And this marriage healing kit is based on decades of ministry and clinical experience. This will help you and your spouse identify the roadblocks in your relationship and, starting from the inside out, build the kind of connection that brings you the love and joy and intimacy you desire and that God wants for you. The intimacy that's physical, emotional, and spiritual. This marriage healing kit has a lot of different kinds of resources. There is a downloadable 40-day prayer guide. You can also get that guide by daily emails in your inbox if you prefer. The Guide to Healthy Communication in Marriage digital ebook will be yours. That helps you find the practical ways to reset the communication between you, even if it's totally broken down. And it comes with some downloadable tip sheets about talking about the hard stuff, like talking about money, talking about sex, and things such as that. It comes with access to our Fully Alive Marriage digital video course, 10 modules helping you deal with the mindset and then the practical skills you need to build a marriage that is fully alive. Some of the topics we deal with there are: what is marriage really for? What are some of the lies you have come to believe about marriage? What's the truth? How do you work out communication? How do you deal with sex? How do you deal with the big roadblocks, such as addiction or infidelity? And then, how do you plan for a future that is good, that will continue to build a fully alive relationship? And this marriage healing kit comes with 3 45-minute individual sessions with me, so you can personally get input onto your unique marriage situation. At the premium level, this marriage healing kit comes with a 3-day marriage intensive with me and some partners, and just 2 or 3 other couples, a small group where you can process and get expert help in actually doing the things that will build a fully alive marriage for you. I want to give you a taste of what is inside this marriage healing kit. So I want to share with you now Module 1 from the Fully Alive Marriage course. You will meet in this digital course some other couples who are at various stages in their marriage healing. You'll meet Jonathan and Elaine, Marilyn and Michael, and Cynthia and Kevin, and you'll see them in this Module 1. We'll talk in this first module about some of those lies that you may have picked up about marriage that maybe you didn't even realize you had come to believe. We'll talk about the most important key that will transform your marriage. And then we'll talk about what the goal of marriage really is. So enjoy this Module 1. Welcome to Module 1 of Fully Alive Marriage. Yes, your marriage is the union of two sinners. Probably about 95% of the married people who write to me say something like, if my spouse would only pay me more attention, give me more sex, be nicer, not get angry so much, then everything would be fine. Yes, you married a sinner. You married someone who doesn't follow through on their promises, who doesn't understand you, says and does things that hurt you, and regularly fails to be the kind of spouse you need, want, and thought you were marrying. You married someone who behaves badly in all kinds of ways. You married someone who is stubborn, irresponsible, refuses to listen, easily gets angry or emotional, or all of the above. But here's the other inconvenient truth. Your spouse married a sinner too. Yes, you also fail to understand, don't meet their needs, act out of selfishness, and are a downright failure at being the spouse God needs you to be. Marriage is always the union of two sinners. There are no other people available. And if marriage wasn't the union of two sinners, then you wouldn't have a chance to be married. But the beautiful thing is that God designed this as a place for both of you to grow and become more of the people He designed you to be. Every marriage is a setup for disaster, but for God. And that but is a big but. It makes a big difference. To start looking at some of these under the surface dynamics, let's explore some of the lies that you may have heard and perhaps bought into about marriage. And then we'll look at God's truth to counteract those lies. There are some lies that culture as a whole seems to promote about marriage, whether you realize that that's what they're saying or not. The first one is, marriage is to make me feel good. Well, isn't it? Aren't I supposed to feel good? This really is a lie. And it leads to feeling like, well, if you're not making me feel good, then I'll just leave. A second lie, marriage is to get all my needs met. Well, shouldn't I get my needs met in marriage? This is also a lie, and of course it leads to the outcome of, well, if you're not meeting my needs the way I want you to, then I'll either become demanding and controlling and try and get you to do that, or I might end up leaving. A third lie: marriage isn't worth it, so it's no use even trying. In 2014, the Washington Post first reported that there are now more single adults in this country than there are married adults. And it's remained that way ever since. It's really not hard to understand why a lot of people feel like, well, with the examples of marriage I'm seeing, why would I want to be married? But there's also some lies that the church promotes. Now, these may be more closer to some truths, but they're distortions. And you might check your own heart to see if any of these are some lies that you have embraced and bought into. The first one is, a happy marriage and family is the goal of the Christian life. Walk into most churches, and isn't that the way that the Christian life is often presented? There's so many programs and material for parents and marriages and whatever, and that must be the goal that we're working toward. But nope, that isn't the goal of the Christian life. Jesus was never married, and he lived fully alive. We are missing a theology of singleness, and even more than that, we have so often failed to understand what the goal of the Christian life is. In truth, it's to become like Jesus. As Paul said, for those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. Becoming like Jesus is what this is all about. Another lie that you may have heard in church is, pray more and everything is going to be okay. That's the answer to everything. Now, of course, pray more, and we'll talk about some specific ways to do that in this course, but you may have been praying and praying and praying, and things are not getting any better. What's up with that? Is God a failure? Are you a failure? What does that look like? One of our friends, Marilyn, experienced exactly that frustration when it comes to church.
There was this expectation that church was a magic wand, right? When we came to the Lord together, because it was together, we were 10 years in of a mess of ungodliness, of a worldly, messy marriage. And then you come to church and, year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm like, why? What happened to the magic wand? Like, we came to Jesus. What happened? Like, what are we doing wrong? Like, why is it not working? And there's a mess that needs to be turned into testimony, right? There is still 10 years of difficulties and issues that God was working with, right? But that expectation of came to Christ, welcome, and everything is perfect. It's real to people that don't grow up in church. It's a real thing that we see that, oh, when I get to the other side and when I know Jesus. And I think the lack of transparency within the people that you start engaging with just puts a heavier burden on your heart, because what are we doing that is so wrong that God hasn't blessed us, that God hasn't fixed it?
There's an often quoted statistic that actually is very difficult to confirm, but it says that 50% of even Christian marriages will end in divorce. Now, whether or not that statistic is 100% accurate, the point is there's a lot of praying going on and marriages are still ending. Why is that? We'll talk about some of that as we go through this course. A friend of mine put it this way: we have taught our children how to divorce well, but not how to do relationships well. That's actually why you're here, learning to do relationships well. Then there's this lie that you may have embraced. And you probably heard this, especially if you were growing up a couple decades ago in the purity culture. This says that don't have sex before marriage and you'll have a fulfilling, satisfied, happy sex life in marriage. Well, one of the problems with that lie is it makes sex all about behavior, and it neglects the important topic of intimacy. Now, God designed that in marriage, sex and intimacy come together. We'll talk a lot more about that in modules 7 and 8, and I know some of you are wanting that part of this course. We're going to get there. But there are many unhappy, even destructive marriages where there has been no sex before or outside of marriage, and they are still far from being fully alive. This also promotes so much shame and guilt that if you may have had sex before marriage, that your unhappy marriage is punishment for that behavior. That's not how God works. But the bigger part of this lie is that it fails to shine the light on the pathway to growing the kind of intimacy that God designed you to have. We're going to help you see that path in this course. Then there's a fourth lie that too many in the church have really wielded as a weapon, and that's that Christian submission means the man gets his way and the wife must follow. Now, hopefully you haven't heard the distortions of that lie, but this comes out of a biblical passage that you may have heard many, many times. In Ephesians, Paul writes, "Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord." And he says that in some other places as well. The problem is when this scripture has been used as a weapon, as a means of harm, abuse, and control. God never designed any part of scripture to be used as a weapon or a means of control. And sadly, too many husbands, wives can do the same, but especially husbands have used this to force sex, submission, and other harmful behaviors in the relationship. But this is not at all what God designed, and it's not what Christian submission is all about. The very verse we just read from Ephesians, the previous verse right before that, puts this in a different perspective. Submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. Christian submission is mutual. Christ is the model of headship. To serve one another, that goes both ways. And if you have been harmed by that lie from church, my heart goes out to you. And we're going to flesh out what this kind of mutual give and take and working through problems in marriage can look like. Now, here's a common lie that can take all of these and bring them together, and it goes something like this. If I'm unhappy, it means I married the wrong spouse. If I get unmarried, or if I marry somebody else, then I'll be happy. It certainly is true that toxic marriage is a reality, and we will specifically address that in Module 9. There are people with an evil heart. And if so, your response to that will need to be a bit different than if your spouse is a person of goodwill, but just not loving well. What God designed marriage to be is different from all those lies. You know, when you do a jigsaw puzzle, there's a picture on the front of the box, and you're going to put those pieces together a whole lot better if you know what the picture is on the front of the box. What's the picture on the front of the box of a Christian, fully alive marriage? We can know some of that from what we know about God, because yes, this was his idea after all. God designed marriage to be a covenant. That's the way he loves us. God doesn't base his love toward us on our response or lack thereof. And in marriage, a covenant is not a contract. A contract says, you do this and then I'll do this. A covenant says, I am committing myself to do this. This is the way I am bringing myself to this relationship, period. That's what a covenant is. And it's what is required to love well. God did not design marriage primarily for your happiness, although in a good marriage there is much happiness, but that's not the point. God designed marriage as a laboratory in which you can learn to love well. God is love, and we are made in his image. We are to become like him, as we read a minute ago, that Paul said, in Romans. We are to learn to love well if we are going to become like God, who is love. So marriage is a vehicle to make you more holy rather than primarily happy. Now, there will be much happiness, but the point is learning to love well. Jay Stringer, author, relationship expert, and therapist, says a committed relationship is doing what it is designed to do when it flushes out the relational and sexual difficulties in each partner. Sometimes we think the relationship is broken when in reality, the marriage system is working flawlessly. That's what it takes to learn to love well. Neither you nor your spouse woke up one day and said, I'm going to sin, I'm going to mess up my own life and my marriage and my spouse's life by sinning. You came to where you are from somewhere. Your spouse did too. And when we talk about marriage as the union of two sinners, it's both the acts that you do and it's your very DNA, your very nature. It's the sins that you have done and, frankly, also the sins that are done against you. It's part of how you think and act and relate to people and the world. Thankfully, redemption covers all of it. Redemption provides forgiveness for the acts that you have done and a way to transform your very inner self so that you relate differently, think and feel differently. That's a process, and it can feel messy, and it can be hard. But that picture on the front of the box, that's where you can head to. There are things you learned. There are things you didn't learn. There are things that happened to you and traumas you experienced that go into the sinful nature with which you bring yourself to your marriage. And it's the same with your spouse. Their sinful nature affects your marriage. Remember, this is the union of two sinners. God's design in marriage, in learning to love well, is that this relationship that is hard shows you where you need to change. It provides the stimulus and encouragement for you to make the changes that you need to and practice loving well. One of the beautiful things about this laboratory is that when you are seen and known and loved anyway, it brings deep healing to your soul. And the same for your spouse. When this laboratory of learning to love well is working as God designed, both of you experience more healing than you could possibly imagine. Now, there is one step that will make a bigger difference in transforming your marriage than any other single thing you can do. Are you ready to hear this transformational step that you can do? Here it is. Focus on changing yourself, not changing your spouse. Now, that does not mean you put up with bad behavior. It doesn't discount your spouse's need to change. But newsflash, you can't change your spouse. All you can do is focus on you. And there's a couple questions to ask to just help shine the light on this. What's it been like to be married to you? Can you honestly say that you have brought yourself to your marriage in the best possible way? Now, a word to first wives and then husbands. For wives, there's a verse that's repeated 2 or 3 times in Proverbs. It's better to live in a desert land than with a quarrelsome and fretful woman. You don't want to be that quarrelsome and fretful woman, regardless of how your spouse is behaving. Cynthia experienced what it was like to have to look at herself in the mirror and realize who had she been bringing to her marriage. Marilyn had to face the same view.
But don't we offend, though, by the silent treatments and the rolling of the eyes?
Yes.
And the words,
exactly.
the daggers.
The haughty eyes.
And the keeping,
yes.
hoovering that thing. Remember what you did? Don't you talk to me that way. Remember what you, don't you do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
That's
we're
right,
offending and we try to rank these sins. But God is saying all of these, all these sins are bad. Your sins are the pine cones. His sins were the offenses. But they're all in this basket, and I'm looking at all of them, and I'm not pleased with any of it.
I would tell that Marilyn, like, let God work on your heart. Let God work on you, because like she said, we're looking at him. Like, Jesus, you need to fix him quick. Like, oh my gosh, did you see that? Did you hear that? What he said, Lord? Like
him,
you
not
know,
me. You didn't. Don't listen to me.
Did you hear what he said to your daughter, Lord? Like but our eyes are deafened to what we're saying and the things that are coming out of our heart, even though we're not even verbalizing them, right? Our thoughts and our actions.
Now, God has things to say to husbands too. Here's one from Peter. Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. If your prayers are not getting the results that you want, are you living with your wife in an understanding way? So that this is not a blame on one or the other. This is looking at who you are and who God is calling you to be. As we come near the end of this Module 1, I want to talk with you about some specific ways to pray about your troubled marriage. And you probably wouldn't be here if your marriage wasn't troubled. Number 1, Jesus, come help. This is too hard. I can't do this. I need you to come and intervene. Please come help. Number 2, Jesus, what's going on here? Sometimes that question can bring some insight that I know in my own life I have found powerful in so many different areas. When it comes to marriage, Jesus, what's going on here may mean, well, there's some things I have to learn and change in my behavior. I have to learn some skills. I have to have a different mindset. It could also be that there is some trauma and some wounds that are disrupting my ability to be intimate and close. There may be some wounds that my spouse has experienced, and they are not choosing to be hurtful to me. This is some wounds that they need healing from. Sometimes the category may be a matter of spiritual warfare. We'll talk a little bit more about that in Module 3. So whatever the category is that Jesus shines the light on can be a very helpful and empowering place to spend some time in prayer. Number 3, Jesus, how do you see my spouse's heart? It's likely that you are seeing your spouse's heart as, just hurtful and out to make your life miserable. But what is God's perspective on your spouse's heart? Now, that is neither all bad or all good in the sense of Jesus sees where they came from and where they are yet failing to be who they need to be. Just that perspective on your spouse's heart can create a lot of compassion and wisdom in how you move forward. And you may have already guessed number 4. Jesus, how do you see my heart? When Jesus looks at your heart, it is not with condemnation. Some of you may hear that question and feel like, well, I would only hear from God that I'm messing up, I'm doing everything wrong. But that is not the way Jesus responds. When there is something in you he needs to change, when he brings you conviction, when the Holy Spirit brings that part of your soul up that needs to change, there is always a directing to your future. There is empowerment to go through the process of change that you need to become the person he needs you to be. And then comes question number 5. Jesus, who do you need me to be to my spouse in this season? What kind of a spouse are you calling me to be? Sometimes that may mean Jesus needs you to take your hands off so that God can do his work in your spouse's life. Sometimes that may mean you need to do some of your own heart work in dealing with bitterness or hiding or criticism or anger. Sometimes Jesus may need you to have some difficult, even confronting conversations. He may need you to take some hard steps in working through some problems rather than hiding from them. So, Jesus, who do you need me to be to my spouse in this season? Now, if you are going through this alone and your spouse is not at this point on the journey with you, or if they may be even particularly toxic, know that these steps can still be fruitful for you. I want to encourage you to still commit to the process and look at your own heart. As your heart changes, it changes the dance in your marriage. If you are doing one set of steps and you change and do another set of steps, your partner will have to respond in some way. You may or may not like how they respond, but it gives the possibility of transforming your marriage. So stick with the process. Now, in the worksheets for this module, you'll be invited to gauge your level of commitment in staying with this process, in looking at your own heart, seeking to change yourself rather than changing your spouse. You'll be invited to ask some of those questions. What's it been like to be married to me? Have there been any lies that I have bought into? And is there some of God's truth about marriage that I yet need to embrace more fully? And you'll be invited to pray those prayers. Jesus, come help. What's going on here? How do you see my spouse's heart? How do you see my heart? And most importantly, who do you need me to be to my spouse in this season? Now, if God willing, you are working this through with your spouse also, there'll be some special exercises for you to work through together. But make sure you look at these questions, each of you individually first. In Module 2, we are going to be addressing the expectations that you brought to marriage, how you came up with those expectations, and how they may have been disappointed. I'll see you then. This marriage healing kit is not only about avoiding divorce or trying to get along. It's about rediscovering the joy of being fully known, deeply loved, and spiritually united between the two of you and between you and God. Isn't that the kind of relationship that you want? That's what God originally created marriage for. Why don't you make today the day your marriage begins to heal? Click the link under this video if you're watching, or in the show notes if you're listening, drcarolministries.com/marriage healing. Check it out a bit more, choose which level is right for you, and I know that this will be a game changer for you and your marriage. I would love to hear from you. If you have a question or a comment, you can leave it under this video if you're watching. You can leave me a confidential message at drcarolministries.com/contact, the contact page there. I would love to hear from you. I'll answer any questions that you have, but I want you to experience marriage healing for yourself. Get this marriage healing kit today. Over the next few weeks, we'll talk more about marriage, and I know you will find these messages helpful. Some practical help. We'll talk with some experts, so keep watching. Make sure you're subscribed, and until next time, God bless you.